Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our ongoing live stream, Let's Write an Adventure. I'm RJ Kerr, and on this channel, we are creating our own campaign in real time so that you can see all of the warts and all, as they say. You can get into all the thought processes and ask all the questions and see every little step of the way, so it's not just some kind of wand waving magical, and then a miracle happens and an adventure unfolds. And so, if this is your first time watching this channel, or first time joining us for this campaign, we are creating one that takes place in our own custom domain of Dread. Uh, that uh, that domain of Dread is one that we're building out all on our own from scratch. It takes place in and around a inland sea that was once the basin of a mighty civilization, now falling in ruins, and it is yeah. So it's sort of a nautical kind of setting that we have that we're creating for this. We've already done a bunch of work on this. We have figured out how our characters are going to get here. They come through a doorway that opens up into this domain of dread on the Blood Moon, drawn by their own personal motivations, including power and treasure and what have you. We have figured out where they're going to land, their first spot where they enter into this domain of dread, into a shanty town that we're calling Darkport, that's ruled by a number of warring gangs and is set on the edge of this inland sea. We have uh, already figured out what villain this domain of dread contains, and that is Ovander, our elemental villain. And so we are still in the process of building Ovander out and understanding the cult of Ovander and what it is that Ovander really is about. We have built out a number of the factions that populate this world, including two that play a key role, one that is an Aboleth-led faction and one that is a Slod-led faction. We have also created our first adventure in this setting, in which the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors. And in doing so, they learn a crucial bit of information. They learn about the existence of a long lost artifact that gives the wielder power in this domain, and it becomes clear to the characters that this is their best ticket out of here, their best ticket to escape this domain of dread with their lives. And so now we're working on the part of the adventure where the characters have escaped captivity. They are armed with this information and they're ready to get proactive. They want to get out there and find, this artifact so that they can, escape with their lives and whatever treasure they manage to hoard along the way. Right. So, this is a proactive part of the adventure. And so we're using a node structure here because we don't really know where the characters are going to go. And we want to give them agency. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Um, and so we're using a node structure where we have all these little, what I call investigative scenes. So scenes where characters parts of the adventure where the characters can go and interact and have a little mini adventure and learn clues and get secrets and what have you that lead them to other nodes, right? So other investigative scenes. Um, and so we've built one that is just sort of our starter one that we can kind of form fit to wherever the characters go. And we've started populating a few of the clues that are in there. And then we've gone through it and we brainstormed what would be cool places for adventures to happen. And then are working on filling those in with appropriate clues that connect them to each other. And so there's a redundancy of clues out here so that the characters aren't going to miss something because they have a bad die roll. They may miss it in that spot, but they still have the ability to find that information later somewhere else. Because Murphy's Law tells us that if we put something in there only once and it's important, the characters are going to miss it, right? So we're going to put it in there a few times or layer a whole bunch of clues in there. And so we're working through and just kind of jumping around and building out some of these investigative scenes. We've already built one where the characters have to go to a dungeon in pursuit of a treasure hunter that has clues, that has information about where this artifact might be, and they've got to get that information out of the treasure hunter, and they got to survive the dungeon on the doing. So we built that one out. So kind of a standard dungeon crawl sort of adventure, little mini adventure in there. So we used the 5-room dungeon setup for that to keep it nice and tight and short, and allow us to theater the mind it so we don't have to do as many maps. And now we're working on one that we're calling, the working title is our Ghost Ship Castle Caper. And this is an area of our world where a multitude of shipwrecks have been gathered around a natural stone arc off a seaside cliff. And the ships have been repurposed into a castle like structure, and have become a Sahuagin stronghold. Here, the characters are looking for a ship's log with clues as to the last known location of the artifact, and we're setting this up so that the players can run this, or the characters can run through this as a raid style or heist style adventure. So not just a standard dungeon crawl. And so we're doing a few new techniques with this. And let me go ahead and get into the page we're using for this, so you can kind of see we've done a fair amount of work already on this. We've sort of defined our vibe for the place, that the stronghold is built from the remnants of a dozen or more shipwrecks, abandoned ships that had drip floated some years ago into the stone arch and were salvaged for building materials by the Sahuagin who claimed these waters. The resulting castle looks very much like a series of ship parts stacked atop each other, connected by ropes and rigging, with a sailcloth windmill capping the structure. And at least half of the stronghold is underwater and flooded, the other half stretching up the sides of the natural stone arch. So we've kind of got our vibe, and using that vibe in place, we went through and we built out a, creature bank, and so just some potential creatures that might exist in this place, and we looked for interesting combinations. We started with the obvious Sahuagin, right? Sahuagin warrior, Sahuagin priest, Sahuagin baron makes sense in here. Sahuagin baron is a little bit heavy for the characters we're balancing for. We're balancing for 4 third-level characters, but since this is a raid style adventure or a heist style adventure, because to be honest with you, they write the same way. The characters just choose whether they fight their way in or whether they sneak their way in, right? But they are in either case rewarded for avoiding some conflict and getting, focusing on their particular objective, as opposed to being rewarded for exploring the whole area like they would in a traditional dungeon crawl. And so we can put some heavier hitters in there because the characters are going to want to try to avoid those interactions. But we have a Sahuagin Baron. Since we've got some flooded places, and Sahuagin have telepathy that allows them to control sharks, we thought that it'd be cool to put in some sharks, right? Makes sense. So Reef Shark and Hunter Shark, from our monster manual. And we're using the 2024 rules for all of these. Not that that changes the CR and the XP, but it gives us a little more diversity. And so actually this is technically a Sahuagin warrior now, as opposed to just a Sahuagin. And then last session had a little bit of a brainstorm, and we thought, well, if Sahuagin have telepathy lets them control sharks, and part of this place is on land, i.e. the natural stone arch and parts that are out of the water, maybe a land shark would be useful. And what is a land shark but a boulette? So we were putting in a boulette and some boulette pups in there, again, for the 2024 rules. Now they've kind of been expanded to pair up with our Sahuagin for an interesting combination. Because I don't know about you, but I've never seen Sahuagin paired up with a boulette, and it kind of makes sense. Land sharks, Sahuagin, kind of goes together, in my mind at least. We set up our encounter difficulty bank to kind of give us a little bit of guide rails on how tough to make each of the encounters. And then we started working on building this out with using not the 5, I won't call it the 5-room dungeon, I'm going to call it the 5-scene dungeon. It's the same thing, except that it's not tied to specific locations, it's more tied to specific moments. And so we're in the process of filling that out right now, where we have built some action groups. So active groups that can and will move about the complex to add a little more dynamic interaction, because it's far more interesting to sneak in if you have to sneak past moving patrols, as opposed to just sneak down an empty corridor and just be extra quiet because maybe there's somebody in the rooms nearby. Much cooler if somebody might come down that corridor at any moment. And so we've begun building those out and populating those in specific areas. Um, and and then we have started thinking about what parts um, of our structure are flooded. What's the water level, what have you. And so we did that last time, where we kind of arbitrarily went through some of the rooms that we have brainstormed and decided whether or not they were flooded, half flooded, not flooded at all, kind of keeping in mind their purpose and what they're doing here. Um, we then sort of started applying our first our our five scene dungeon methodology to this, right? And so we put in our entry, we put in a setback, puzzle, denoted our climax and our reward, and how those differ here in a raid style, or heist style kind of adventure, where it's less about going through specific key locations and more about completing a specific objective. Is our entry becomes really important, because that's where all of the heist planning comes about. The characters are rewarded for doing a lot of planning before they jump in, right? The more thorough their planning, the more thorough their reconnaissance, the more information they collect up front, the better armed they are when they actually, do their incursion into the stronghold to obtain their objective. And so uh, we know that we're going to have to build out that entry. Now, that being said, heist planning is one of the last things that we'll create as part of what the characters might discover during the heist planning here, because we want to know pretty much everything else about this adventure before we start filling that bit in. Um, our setback is simple. What happens if the players get spotted or caught? And that's the raising the alarm. And that's an obvious setback for an adventure like this. And so we'll have to define what happens if the characters get noticed and the alarm gets raised and the Sahuagin start trying to respond. And that's part of the reason we have built out these action groups, so that we have dynamic groups that can respond to this sort of thing, and go from static to active, or active to alert, and what have you. Um, we brainstormed out some locations, because we're going to need to have some physical places to kind of populate, um, the sort of we need to populate with encounters, and for the characters to explore. This will be important when we're developing our map as we go on. But for the most part, it's about kind of we're going to be working on putting in some flavor into these places here. We've already kind of come up with the encounters for most of them with these action groups, because we have keyed them to particular locations. And these are just the starting locations, because again, these are going to be dynamic, they move around. But we don't have to worry so much about those encounters as we're filling this out, more about kind of just giving a vibe and some description to each of the rooms here, and its purpose, so that we have some tools in our toolbox when we go to play this. Um, and then we talked about our climax, right? Because in a 5 room dungeon, you have the big bad, right? Our BBEG. And in something like this, where it's more of a scene and less of a uh, of an encounter focus, right? Um, that doesn't quite line up. We need a big climactic moment, something that makes things, that's another challenge, a big challenge to overcome for the characters when they reach kind of the end of the adventure here. But that isn't necessarily them fighting a big boss, because they're rewarded for avoiding those fights, right? For not having to deal with that kind of stuff. So we had the idea that maybe some dignitaries arrive, or an allied group with the Sahuagin arrive and are admitted into the stronghold, and therefore are sort of the pattern of movement around the stronghold changes at the end of the adventure, meaning that when it comes time for the characters to get out of there after they have the ship's log, it's a they've got to follow a different way out than they did on the way in. They're not just repeating themselves. They have a new puzzle to solve. And then, of course, the reward is simple. It's the ship's log with all the clues that they're trying to uncover in this investigative scene, or at least most of the clues. We may sprinkle some other clues elsewhere. We'll kind of see how that goes. Um, and so that's what we've got worked on here. It's quite a bit. I know that we've been a little extensive on here, but we haven't really focused on building raid style or high style adventures on this channel much before. I think I've done like one video on them. And so I'm really excited to kind of explore some more with you on this and talk about my approach when I do this. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the work here and start filling some stuff out. As always, if you have comments, ideas, suggestions, questions, thoughts, jump into the chat. Let me know. I love to hear from you as we work on this. Some of the most creative ideas that we've come up with have really come from you all. So feel free to toss your thoughts in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish out some action groups here because that's just kind of on the tip of my brain, as it were. We have got, let's see here, area 4, 5 are flooded. So is area 7. Area 6 is half flooded. And we haven't put any sharks into here yet. So I think we need to put some sharks in these encounters. Sahuagin and sharks. So let's go ahead and toss some of those in. Let's see. So for what are those spaces? So 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's see what we kind of have come up with here. We've got barracks room. 4, 5 is kitchen. 6 is great hall. 7 is a storage hold. So maybe 7 should be a pure shark encounter. The Great Hall would be more a mix of soldiers and sharks, I think. Probably no sharks in the kitchen. It's probably a small workforce there, but something to still be snuck past or dealt with quietly if we're doing a raid as opposed to a heist. And then the barracks room should be probably, pure soldiers with maybe a shark. And so, yeah, let's do this. So let's see here. 7 is the storeroom. Let's say the math on this is pretty easy. We could do a hunter shark, and then we could do a bunch of reef sharks. Let's see here. Looks like we got a comment in the chat here. Jonathan Frost says, did we designate an area that is partially kept for shark pens like dog pens? We did not, and we should do that. We absolutely should. So that's going to add an extra area. So let's see here. Shark 13 shark pens. And we will probably add some more areas to this as well. So if you've got ideas for stuff we might toss into here, don't be shy about it. I appreciate that kind of input because if we get to somewhere around 20 rooms or something along those lines, that's not too bad, especially since we don't have to. One, we don't have to have an encounter in every single room, and two, we don't have to do as much building out on each of the spaces here because the characters are going to spend less time exploring and more time focusing on their objective. Or at least they're likely to. You never know. They might decide to just charge in guns a-blazing. I guess swords are swinging in our fantasy setting here, but you get the drift. But shark pens. Okay, so that means we need to add that here. Shark pens should absolutely be flooded. No reason for them not to be. Let's add another encounter here. 13. Cool. So what we're thinking about, let's go ahead and do the shark pen here because that's pure sharkiness that we should have in here. What we could do in this one, maybe we should do one hunter shark and a couple reef sharks, and then maybe in the storage room it's 2 hunter sharks. That could be better. I think that makes a little more sense to me. So let's go ahead and let's do, yeah, I know I'm jumping around here. Let's go ahead and do guard sharks. And we'll do 2 hunter sharks prowl this area. And we're going to say that they're static, but again, these are conditions that change. I'm going to actually, instead of saying alert, I'm going to say alert condition, alert status. We'll say status on here. And the idea is that static means that they're kind of doing their business in that particular area and staying relatively close. Active means that they're out and they're looking and they're on patrol. And then alert is that they're actively looking for, they're actively sweeping the compound for intruders and that kind of deal. And so, one or all of these might become active or alert at certain points in the adventure. And so the sharks are probably prowling around here to start, but with their keen senses, maybe they could easily become active and start widening their search, looking for prey, i.e., the characters. Okay, well, it looks like we get another comment in the chat here. Jonathan Frost, holy moly, I just thought about a mundane treasure, a pistol with a limited number of shots and powder. Use the wand rules to limit the usage. Maybe the powder is magical and pricey to make. Yeah, if we wanted to really lean into kind of the piratical sort of stuff here and get into shot and powder and that kind of thing, we could do kind of pistols. There are rules in the player's handbook for firearms, and we could certainly work that into our campaign. I will be honest, I tend to avoid firearms in my fantasy settings unless I'm doing Spelljammer, and that's just because it's just a personal preference. I mean, honestly, that's all there is to it. It's just a personal preference. But if we wanted to for something like this, there's nothing wrong. If you wanted to for something like this, there's nothing wrong with working in pistols and cannons and really kind of going whole hog with that. It can be very cool, and it's not that much more complicated to run. But yeah, good idea. Good idea. Just depends on the vibe that you're trying to achieve. Let's see here. Okay, so shark pens. Let's get 100 shark is going to be 450 XP. That's depends on probably. I don't generally make these active groups. I try to keep most of them medium or low, because there is the high probability that a number of them are going to show up at once if they get alerted, and you don't want this to turn into just a instant TPK, right? Where a bunch of hard groups show up and there's just no getting out of it, right? It's one thing for one hard group to show up. It's another thing for them just to be all of those. And so right now we've got 2 hard and perhaps deadly, where we've got this we've got the Boulette pack in Area 9, and then we've got the Baron and the Retinue in Area 3. And so that's plenty of hard encounters for this this adventure. So we'll make this a medium one. Actually, let's see, maybe a medium one. We'll make it a medium one, because we can always split them up. Not all of the sharks have to move as one. We can always change that if we need to. So we can do 1 hunter shark, is about half there, and then we can do 4 reef sharks, and that's easy setup here. So we're going to say shark pack, 1 hunter shark And 4 reef sharks den in this area. Okay. And they too are probably static. We don't want to have too much that's static in here because we do want to maintain some active stuff here. So, but things like the boulette pack are probably static. Let's see here. Security detail in area 11. What was area 11? Treasure room. Yeah, they'd be static. We can make the per group active. So they start, and then they kind of have their own jobs as they go around the stronghold. Let's see. Let's build the rest of these out. We'll probably make some. We'll make some that are active here. So again, 4 is barracks room. So mostly, let's do 1 reef shark in there, just kind of as a. Make this a low encounter. So 1 reef shark is kind of like their mascot, their pet, hangs out in there with them, and then we've got 5 Sahuagin warriors in there. So let's say off-duty warriors. We'll say 5. Oop. 5. Did I make that bold? There we go. 5 Sahuagin warriors. And 1 reef shark pet. Can be found here at all hours. All right. We're going to say that they're active because they're not just sitting around. They're, enjoying their downtime. And they're up and they're moving. They're doing stuff. 5 is the kitchen. It's work detail. We're going to make them active too. While I think about it. Static in the crow's nest. That makes sense. Kitchen. So, kitchen detail. This is probably a low encounter as well. So this is probably, 6 Sahuagin warriors here. 1 is a boss. 6. Again, warriors. Oop. Warriors should be bold. Warriors, work, kitchens, and mess hall. Okay, and they're active. They're moving around doing stuff. So means we also probably need a mess hall. Unless they just serve... let's get rid of that. We don't need that. Because they could just serve the Great Hall and the barracks room. So 3 areas here, but they could be moving between those three areas as they go. And you can, randomize some of this movement when you're doing this. You don't have to constantly be thinking about how the shifts are going or that kind of deal. You can simply, occasionally roll a D4 or whatever, and on a one, they, they move positions, they go to a different room, or and on a three, 2, 3, 4, they they continue working in the room that they're in or something like that. I'll frequently do that with high style adventures, just to kind of take some of the decision fatigue off my plate, um, and just roll a few dice for the various rooms, so that I know kind of where they're going, and what they're doing. And if I really want to make it easy on myself, I sometimes, especially if I only have 20 rooms or something like that, if they move, I'll roll a d20 and figure out what room number they go to, something like that. If it doesn't make sense, I'll re-roll or I'll just pick somewhere else. But you can add some random movement to this, which adds a little more tension sometimes when you've got some planned movement that the characters are aware of, and then there's just some random movement that moves through. Like, so for example, the patrols that are here, um, those are probably pretty regular, right? Those are something that characters can watch and plan out and sort of get the vibe on. They know the paths and the routes and the timing and that kind of um, the kind of thing. And uh, but the movement of the kitchen workers might be more random. And so we might roll dice for this and not roll dice for the sentries because we know where they're going. Um, and all of that adds to the tension of this style encounter. Oh, hey, Sinclair, thanks for dropping in. I appreciate you stopping by to say hi. Thank you. Good to see you. Good to have you here. Um, okay, so we've got one area so far that we have not put an encounter in yet, and this is I believe, our Great Hall. It is. And it is half flooded. Um, and so let's do four Sahuagin warriors and two reef sharks in here. I think kind of soldiers on duty, stopping in for a meal or something like that, or moving through the area, or part of their patrol of the interior of the stronghold or something along those lines. So we're going to say. We'll say, I don't want to call them sentries. I'm going to call them patrol. Let's call them a patrol. And we'll say 4 Sahuagin warriors and 2 reef sharks. Patrol Great Hall and surrounding rooms. Cool. And so that makes them active. And you'll notice that, on my list here, everybody starts as either static or active. Nobody starts as alert, right? Because alert indicates that they're aware that something is wrong. And so that should only happen if the characters, you know, give cause, right? If the characters do something that causes a group to become alert and have them start looking. And alert doesn't even necessarily mean that they've raised the alarm. It just means that they're suspicious and they're beginning to look for something outside of their normal duties. And so what we might do then is when we talk about raising the alarm here, we might start defining some of these statuses here. So let's see here. The stronghold is in various states of readiness. Ooh. Hey, we're about halfway through this, so I'm gonna take a quick break and do my shameless self plug here, because I am not just a guy on the internet that tells you how to write adventures. I am also a professional dungeon master, and I would love the opportunity to get to play with any and all of you. Some of you have already jumped into my games, and I really appreciate that. Um, but I run games on startplaying.games. You can find my content at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. And I run a collection of modules, my own homebrew written adventures, um, campaigns and one shots. I've got a couple campaigns right now that are in progress and others that are getting ready to start, looking for new players in their seats. So I've got a Lost Mine of Phandelver one. This one, in fact, that has a one seat left. We're actually in the Shattered Obelisk portion, and so we're doing the second half of that adventure. And so they are investigating the Far Realm and what have you. Um, 28 sessions in. Um, we've got this one here that has two seats left. Is new. Pretty much just started. The next session is the second session. And we're playing the Lost Mine of Phandelver there as well, so it's a good one to jump into. It's a cool learn to play. We've also got things like the Tomb of Annihilation running, and then Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is one of my favorite episodic adventures. I think it's a lot of fun and kind of thematic to what we're building here. I do toss one shots in there, and the one shots that come up are things like Hag Heist, which is another heist style adventure, one that I wrote. And did a short video here on this channel about when I came up with the original idea, but it has grown quite a bit since then. So if you ever want to check it out and see if I actually know what I'm talking about when it comes to writing adventures, then jumping into one of my one shots or one of my homebrew heavy campaigns is a good place to start. Anyway, end of shameless self-plug. I will just say again, you can find me at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr and check out my games there. I would love to see you all there. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get back to writing out our campaign. So, raising the alarm. The stronghold is in various states of readiness. Some inhabitants are tied to specific locations at the start of the adventure, while others move about the stronghold at will. Let's see here. The difficulty of raising the alarm depends on how alert the triggering action group is. And so we'll say action groups move through the following states of alertness. So what we'll say is static. The action group remains in one location. They are unaware of intruders. Active. The action group moves between locations. They are unaware of intruders. We'll say alert. The action group searches various locations looking for intruders. They are, we don't need to say they're suspicious of intruders because they're looking for intruders. And then we can say alarm. The action group notices intruders and begins raising the alarm. And it's a simple kind of process here, right? So that means that there's a number of levels that a group goes through before the alarm is raised, right? Now those levels might go pretty darn fast, but it means that our characters have to fail more than a single check most of the time before the alarm is raised. And that's important because, again, you don't want it hinging on a single die roll most of the time if you can avoid it. Every once in a while, it's kind of cool to have a big thing hinge on a single die roll because it makes it really tense. But the whole stronghold, catching on that that the characters are in there, changes the dynamic of the adventure pretty dramatically. And it can turn this from a heist to a raid, and from a raid into just a bloodbath. And so, or the characters get captured or what have you, that kind of thing. Which reminds me, we probably need prison cells. Prison cells wouldn't be a stronghold without prison cells and dungeons, right? But as I was saying, it means that there's several things have to go wrong before the alarm is raised throughout the compound, and there are lots of opportunities for the characters to engage and do something about that before it happens, right? So, like an active group that the characters fail a stealth check or something like that, and they're noticed by an active group. They may not be spotted, but more of, we might say that signs of their presence have been noticed, and now the group is on their toes. They're suspicious. They're looking around. They're trying actively to search out intruders. And so how I would kind of do that would be, an active group, the characters just have to beat their passive perception to avoid being noticed. So they just have to beat that with their stealth checks. Whereas an alert group is making perception checks actively. And so there's another level of variability there, that they might roll really well, they might roll really low. And in either case, the characters have to beat that with their stealth checks to remain hidden. If they're then spotted, then yes, it's time to raise the alarm, but the alarm isn't an instantaneous thing. There's an action that has to be taken by your action groups to raise the alarm. And so usually that involves somebody running off to alert another room and creating kind of a cascade of alarm states here, which can be cut off, can be circumvented by the players or by the characters through quick action, which means that we might end up with a part of the stronghold that has the alarm raised and another part that doesn't, which again gives them more agency and really rewards them for quick thinking and daring action and what have you. So I like to have that progression in there in mind, and you can call it whatever you want. When you're creating your own, just go with whatever steps kind of make sense to you. But it gives me an idea of how much has to go wrong before the alarm gets raised, before the whole stronghold is alerted, and before it kind of comes down around around the ears of the adventurers. What we should define, though, is what happens when action is taken when the alarm is raised. Because again, it's not, it's not like a fire alarm here, right? Where somebody just has to get to the button and press it, and the alarm goes off. Although you could be writing an adventure that has that level of magic in it. I've certainly played adventures that have. I got a good friend who is working on a campaign that is sort of set in like a kind of a fantasy version of the 90s in a pocket dimension, and so they have, they have access to magic like that, and so when an alarm gets raised, it might actually be an audible alarm that goes off. But I don't foresee that in the Sahuagin stronghold. I see this being more of a if you'll pardon the expression, kind of a phone tree kind of effect, where one group tells another, and that group tells another, that group tells another, and the message has to kind of cascade down the line. So, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little hoarse here. Let me drink a little water, and then we will continue. All right, so let's say heading to, we'll say, the alarm. We'll call this one raising the alarm. Let's call this. We'll keep setback there just so that we can kind of maintain our nomenclature. But I would delete that. I would overwrite setback there if I was writing this for myself, because I don't need to know that it's the setback. As I go to run it. So let's say alertness statuses. That seems like an awkward phrase. We'll change it. We'll come up with something else. All right, raising the alarm. When a action group moves into the alarm status, they are aware of intruders and must alert other action groups within the compound. One member of the group, I should say one or more members of the group, except the sharks aren't going to alert people. They're going to just fight. One or more sentient members of the group flee combat to flee to alert the next nearest action group, while the others remain behind to engage the intruders' characters. So we know that intruders and characters are, in this instance, the same thing. Let's see here. The newly alerted group moves into the alarm status and repeats the process until the entire stronghold is in the alarm status, or until stopped by character actions. Which is a clunky way of saying that, if the characters do something to intervene, they might they might stop an alarm in its tracks, right? If they, fire off an eldritch blast and it, blows apart the guy that was running off to alert the next group, and they've got everybody else engaged. Well, then that's just one group that's alarmed, and another, and the others aren't necessarily. Now, somebody within hearing might be alerted, might move into the alert status as they hear a scuffle and come around to investigate, or something along those lines. So there still has a cascading effect, still has a triggering effect, but it's perhaps not as severe, not as dramatic for the characters, and not as potentially problematic. And it can allow them to have some minor combats throughout this encounter without everything kind of becoming without the whole stronghold kind of coming down around their ears. So we should also, now that I think about it, give ourselves a little bit of a backdoor just in case the worst happens. So let's say captured characters. So we should probably come up with what happens if the characters are overwhelmed, because we don't want a TPK. It's just not satisfying to anybody. The most pleasure that you can get out of that is you can cackle maniacally and burn character sheets and be that guy while you savor the tears of your players. But let's be honest, that's not really what we're here to do, right? We're here to have fun. We're here for everybody to have fun, and a TPK just isn't fun for anybody. So what we want is we want a different result. We already know that there is a situation that could occur here where the characters are just overwhelmed, where there is just no way they're fighting their way out of this. There's no way they're running away. They're completely, surrounded. And Jonathan Frost says sold into slavery. Yeah, we could, but we've already done that one. So we're gonna do something. We're gonna do something different. Although they might be held for that potentially, but we should define what happens to them if they're captured. Where do they end up? Where's their gear? How long are they held there? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be tried and executed? Are they going to be sold into slavery? Are they going to be, something else? Are they going to be turned over to the aboleth, or bartered over to the slot, or something along those lines? So let's define that. Well, we've still got some time here this evening. Let's say captured characters awaken with 1 hit point and this is assuming the characters don't give up, don't surrender. Modify this if they surrender. It's not like they get beaten until they're unconscious and at 1 hit point. But let's assume that the characters don't run. They try to fight it out. Things are going to a TPK. Everybody's taken down. Now we have a cutscene where they wake up with 1 hit point in the prison cells. That's what area? What do we say? Area 14. Area 14. Area 14. Without their equipment and armor. That reminds me, we need to add an Area 14 here, and we need to say, I think it's the prison cells are probably half flooded. They either need to be not flooded or half flooded, and I think it makes sense for them to be half flooded, considering the nature of the Sahuagin. They might capture other fishy folk and put them in there. But they need to have some space for air-breathing prisoners as well. And we'll make another action group here. Simple one, I think. Probably sentries. And we'll just repeat what's at the gatehouse. We'll say Two Sahuagin warriors keep watch over the prisoners. And they would be static. I'm a big fan of their of. Okay, let me back up and say that yes, it would make sense for there to be more than two guards looking after this group of prisoners, who have just snuck in and probably wreaked chaos and havoc, and it would be smart, right, for them to be shackled and chained and kept in a cage and yada 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 yada. We know that as the DM that the players are going to figure it out, but I'm a big fan of making it not too hard to escape. Um, because I just think it's the escape is always a cool moment, right? And so when you want your characters to escape, you want them to get back into the action. You don't need to make it, overly difficult. You don't want it to be so easy that it's meaningless, right? But you do want to create those cool moments where they trick the jail keeper, the warden or whatever, and they strangle him with a nightstick, or sneak the keys off his belt, or something along those lines. And you want those cool little moments, and then have them to kind of get back into the action. Um, so, so I don't think we need a heavy hitting encounter in there, especially since they're likely to be without weapons. You know, the group, them fist fighting this group of armed Sahuagin is a little more interesting than you know than yeah than having it be another instance of overwhelming force. We got another comment here. It says the half and fully flooded areas are likely inhabited by fish, crabs, squid, octopi, sea snails, jellyfish, etc. Some might be venomous or ornery. Yep, absolutely. And it's worth us building that out when we're talking about some of them. Continuing to build out some of the flooded areas. We can talk about what kind of sea life is there, and how that works out. And I would kind of think of that more as dungeon hazards. Green slime, brown mold, that kind of vibe, as opposed to um, encounters specifically. Because while I'm sure we'll have an encounter somewhere else in this adventure where the characters actually have to fight jellyfish, because that would be cool. I think we got enough kind of. I think they would be small enough in a place like this that it's inhabited, that they're not worried about predatory jellyfish. They're just worried about ones that might sting and cause, like you said, that might be venomous, and ornery, and so we might have lionfish in there and that kind of deal that can be stepped on or accidentally grabbed. Same with jellyfish, as you mentioned, or squid, or that kind of deal. And so we'll write them more as like a trap, I think, than writing them as encounters. But definitely an idea, definitely a good idea. So let's go ahead and toss those in. Let's say that's already a 2. So let's say heading 3, and we'll say sea life hazards TBD. I like that idea. Fire coral is another thing we could put in there. Having touched that, God, that hurts. That hurts a lot. So do lionfish, by the way. If you haven't been stung by one, that was a new kind of pain. I wouldn't recommend that, but it would certainly put an adventurer off their game. Definitely something to pop in there. But okay, so back to our captured characters for a second here, as we're getting. Well, I guess we're kind of at our time here. Let's finish the thought, and then we'll wrap up. And so, captured characters awaken with 1 hit point in the prison cells without their equipment and armor. They are guarded by 2 again warriors that act as jailers. The warriors believe there is no escape for the prisoners, and thus are likely to underestimate them. The character's equipment is kept in a nearby strongbox, awaiting a nearby strongbox to be repurposed later. And we could have the box being locked. We could have it in another room, just nearby. But their stuff is together somewhere. We don't need to scatter all of their goods to the wind. And the short time they're there. Now, if it takes them a week to escape, yeah, absolutely. If they dilly dally and lollygag and decide that they're gonna chill out in the jails for a while, then yeah, their stuff is gonna start disappearing. But for a quick prison break, we don't need to have them lose valuable bits of equipment, especially at this early level. There's nothing that they would be carrying at this point, magic or otherwise, that would be so astounding to the Sahuagin that they would whisk it away elsewhere. If they had something like a Holy Avenger, longsword or something like that, then yeah, that probably ends up being gifted to the Baron, and they might have to go and figure out how to steal that back. But at third level characters, they're not likely to end up in that situation, so no need for us to make this overly complicated for them. All right, we are at our hour, so let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate the time you spend with me, and I love the ideas. I especially love the idea of putting some sea creatures in the flooded areas here and making them hazards that the characters have to face. That was a cool one, and not something that I was really thinking about, although now in hindsight it makes total sense that we would do that. If you have enjoyed this stream, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps the channel grow, helps more people find this, and frankly helps me stay motivated to keep doing these videos, because I really appreciate your feedback. That it's a nice reminder that I'm not just singing into the wind here, that there are people out there who enjoy this content. If you want to jump into one of my games, come find me and on Start Playing at Dot Games /GM/RJ Kerr. You can find all my campaigns that are up there. I'll have some more one-shots being posted here in the near future as I republish them. And I hope to meet some of you, if not all of you, at my table sometime. One quick announcement for the channel here. We're going to have we had our regular Monday night. That was tonight. We're going to have a regular Wednesday night live stream, and I'm also going to do a special Friday night live stream. That one will be a little bit later. I'm on Central Time, and so it'll be at 8:30 Central Time on Friday, and we'll spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. We'll see what how much fun we're having working on the campaign some more. If that goes well, then we might start doing those on every other Friday, adding those in as additional time. So thank you very much. And looks like we got one more comment here from Sinclair. Thank you. This gave me the kick I needed to finish my next campaign episode. Fantastic. I'm really excited that you came and you joined in. And it's good to have you here. And it's good to just get to have this chance to be creative with you all. So thank you for contributing. I really appreciate it. All right, everybody. I will see you on Wednesday. Talk to you then.